Hello. So hi, I'm Nicolas Gregoire, and I will talk about security and security of processing XML content. So I first have a quick introduction. I've been working in information security for more than 12 years. I own my own company since 2 years. And I had a nice engagement for a client where I had to deal with XML digital signatures application, one client side and two server side, and I compromised 3 targets during the pen test. And I found this kind of technology around XML really fun, and so I chose to investigate, and I spent most of my free research time on this kind of subject since. And so I have now something like 20 vulnerabilities related to XML processing in a lot of softwares. So you can find a lot of CMS like .NET Nuke or SharePoint or Liferay, and some very specific features like XML-sec for digital signatures. And that's the table of contents. So I will first introduce XML technologies in order to help everybody to grasp the following parts. Then I will speak about encapsulation, which is the fact of hiding interesting data inside XML document, here in order to evade antivirus protection. Then I will speak about some denial of service attacks used in order to detect in black box mode which kind of processing is done. And then we have 2 parts related to exploitation of XML external entity vulnerabilities and XLT vulnerabilities. So XML stands for Extensible Markup Language. So we will define these 3 terms. The easiest one is markup. So everybody know HTML. So it's similar. You have lower than and greater than tags. This form tags. And that's a very basic description of a book in XML format. So it's a very basic markup with attribute and things like that. The second term is extensibility. It's very, very important. In fact, when you define an XML document, you need to understand namespaces. Namespaces will instruct the XML parser what is the precise meaning of a tag. And usually a namespace is defined by a URL. That's a very basic example. It's something like a HTML document with 2 namespaces. This is the default one, and this is the full one. The default one is mapped to the URL, the official URL of XHTML, and the full one is linked to something private. And when a browser will interpret this kind of content, only the word will be underscored because the browser has no idea of what means the U tag in the full namespace, so it didn't act on it, but it knows the U tag in the XHTML namespace, so it underscores this part of the text. So it's very basic example. The main use of namespaces is to avoid ambiguities. For example, if you met a font tag in a document, you need to know if it's related to the SVG specification, to the XHTML specification, or to some very obscure Oracle configuration file. But from a hacker perspective, the interesting feature is this one. You will use namespaces to trigger some very specific functionality which are useful to you. So the first one, this namespace is used to call PHP code from XSLT. The second one is used to create file on the local hard drive in WebKit, for example. And the third one is Java to XSLT gateway in Zalanje. Just to complete, these 3 namespaces are used in exploit I published last year. The last term is language, meaning that XML is not data only. You could have some data, of course, but you can also have some code in XSLT form, which is still valid XML. You can have some grammar, which will describe the document. This is the document type definition. It's still a valid XML. And you have some processing instruction, something similar to the PHP one, which will instruct the XML parser to do this kind of processing or, on the document. So I let you read a little bit. No, I kill. So this is a medium complex XML file. The interesting part, the first line, okay. The first line is missing because of the display, I think so. So the first line is a processing instruction. Then you have a doc type here, which is the grammar of the document. Then here you have some data, pure data. And here you have some XSLT code, which will be executed. And all this document is used to generate here some SVG data. Okay, the question is it really useful? And the answer is yes, because the document I just shown is have some very interesting properties. It's first XML document with embedded XSLT code, which is not very often made in real life. It's a dynamic SVG image. So depending on the XSLT code, you can generate this or that output. And it's a proof of concept for last year vulnerability in WebKit dropping file on the local file system. So if we display this document in several browsers, we get some green circles in Transformix, which is the XSLT parser of Firefox, in Opera 2. But if you are using Chromium or an iPad or an iPhone or Safari Mobile, you will get a red circle. It's patched now, I think. You will get a red circle and you will have some file created on your local drive. Use case for XML, it's nearly everywhere, mainly in the web context. So your Office documents are XML based, your web page are XML based. When you are following blogs, you are using XML, etc., etc., etc. In real life, you will often meet some XML content. This is Microsoft Link, and the user interface allow you to select here XML file, so we can suppose it will be later passed by the application. This is W3C, which offers very kindly XSLT gateway to everybody on the internet. As you can see, everybody can provide his own URL to both the XML data and the XSLT code. So it's probably just a remote shell on the W3C servers, but I didn't check in details. And so we are in France, so everybody know Chronopost. For strangers, foreigners, it's a French shipping service. And if you are using the professional version, you get some tracking by emails, and you get this kind of links in the email. And if we zoom, we have 2 parameters, which are XML URL and here XSL URL. So exactly similar to the W3C application. The fun part is that this servlet and these parameters are exactly the same that in the sample application published with Xalan. So I hope Chronopost is not using the sample application on their production network because it's very, very, very easy to compromise. but I didn't check. So if somebody is working for Chronopost, we can chat later. And this is a very stupid Google doc, which is in URL, XSL URL equal HTTP. And, excuse me. So you have some ASPX technology, you have some xQuery, you have this is some Java and some PHP. So there is no discrimination. Everybody is using XML and XSLT. Okay. For people working on consulting or penetration testing, you need to have somewhat like a methodology. And here's some question we need to wonder when auditing XML-enabled application. First, it's always the same problem. How can I provide some XML content to the application? Which interfaces are available? Second question, if I can provide some XML content, is it processed by the application? It's very important to answer. For example, if you upload a SVG file, which is XML, to any Wikimedia application, you have an automatic conversion to PNG. So it's very hard to know that if you are only working in a black box mode and you just upload a file and you are triggering a processing server side. So it's interesting to notice. If you find some processing, you need to know who is doing the processing and where. It could be client side or server side. In some B2B context, you have some gateways doing automatic translation between versions of the protocol. So client servers, and gateways. And a very classic example, if you are reading blog feeds, are you reading the feed locally on your own machine using your browser or dedicated software? Or are you doing the processing on the server side, for example, using RSS feed integrated to your Google homepage? So it's an interesting question. And then you need to edit specifically the processing point you identified before. So there is a bunch of questions to ask about data, grammar, and code. So all the demonstration will be based on some atom feeds. So atoms are used in order to track new entries on a blog. And this is a minimalist format, which is not very pertinent in real life. You just have the blog title, and for each entry, its title. And this is the infrastructure of the demonstration setup. So I have an attacker here. I have some web servers providing some Atom data. It's the blog you are reading. And we have 3 Atom readers, online Atom readers, so processing is done server side. 2 under Linux, 1 using PHP and XSLT, 1 using a Perl library dedicated to Atom parsing, and 1 under Windows and JSP and XRNJ. Okay, I will show you that. Okay. So for the moment, don't care of the lot of buttons. I will be too far off the mic. So here we are providing the URL of the Atom feed, which is generally hosted on the blog. And here we are providing some layout code, which will be used by the PHP and GSP application to present the content. Most of the time, web developers, consider XSLT code as CSS, which is only for doing markup. That's why I call it layout, but it's really some code. And we have some very minimalist application. So that's some Perl code using the XML Atom library in order to generate your page. Oh. I have a problem. I can't access all my layout. Okay, better. So very minimalist Perl code. It's 20 line. It's shorter in PHP. I just load the data, load the layout, and process them. And it's very similar in JSP. I get the two parameters, I set up the transformer, and I execute it. Okay. This is a copy of the atom feed of the US cert. It's a local one, but it don't change anything. And this is XSLT layout code who will print the oh shit. Okay. Here we are printing the title, and here we are printing the title of the entries. And so if we execute them, we have a very nice atom reader, online atom reader. Okay, so that's the number of the entry, that's the size of the entry, and that's the title of the entry. That's the Perl one, the PHP one, and the JSP. Okay. So, first, encapsulation. XDP is a file format defined by Adobe, which is used to, it's described as an XML-based companion to PDF. I don't know what does it mean, but this is a screenshot of the Wikipedia page, and the interesting part is here. XDP is a container for PDF and XFA, and it can also be contained in PDF. So everybody sees the tricks. You can play something like Russian dolls, putting PDF inside XDP, inside PDF, inside XDP, and try to crash something or evade something. Here we will try to evade antivirus solutions. This file is a PDF generated by Metasploit using 2 years old vulnerability. And here we have 8 out of 9 antivirus detecting it. And here 27 out of 43. So we will use some kind of magic, like 10 lines of Ruby. In fact, the red part is the container, the XDP container. Your malicious PDF is here. You are base64 encoding it. You put the result here, and you get a malicious XDP file. You submit it back to antivirus solution, and you get 0 and 0. So you have full evasion of any antivirus solution available. This is out since the beginning of last year, and it seems antivirus don't care. For the record, it's in the Metasploit crank since last month, so you can already play with it. The fun part is that by default on Windows, Adobe Reader will open the XDP file if you double click on it. So I use it in penetration testing, sending XDP file to my victims. They double click and get a shell, and all the AV are evaded on my way from my own setup to the customer computers. So it's very efficient. Okay. I have a lot of tricks about encapsulation, but I have only a few minutes to spend of it, but I have much more way to hide data. So, limited dose, we will try to consume a lot of resource during a very short time in order to detect some processing. For example, if I upload my SVG image to Wikimedia, I described previously, is the DTD, the grammar part of the document, passed by the application? That's a good question. How can we answer that? It's very simple. We have a very classic denial of service attack, which is the billion love attack. It's very, very simple. It's not the fun part. So we have a variable which is lol. Its value is lol space, or just lol here. Then lol1 is 10 times lol, lol2 is 10 times lol1, blah, 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 up to lol9, okay? And when I call lol9, the parser will try to find its value and dereference all this stuff. So lol is 3 characters long, so we get something like 3 gigabytes of memory which are used in order to display this document. So it will be enough to trigger a little time delay and measure it and be sure that the DTD is processed on the server. Okay, exactly the same problem, but now we have a XML digital signature solution provided, for example, by your own governments for changing your passport or things like that. And you want to know if they are using XSLT. So we will use XSL number, which is by default in the XSLT specification. It's used to convert one number to another format. Here the number we want to convert is 1337. I wonder why. And the format we want to get the output is I, which is Roman numerals. Okay, everybody see what is Roman numerals? Is something like that. Okay? So converting 1337 in Roman gives that. The interesting part is that M here is the largest unit in Roman numerals. So if I go upper, I can't use user units. I need to use M. So the attack is very simple. I will provide a very large value here, and I will get 1 gigabyte of M. So it's exactly the same problem that with XML. So now I can identify if my government is using secure or not XSLT, XML DSIG gateways. Okay. So here I only use lol6 because I don't want to crash the computer I'm currently using. And I get 4 megabyte string, okay? This is the Perl application. The PHP one will trigger an error message, which is from LabXML. Thanks, Christophe. But I don't know why only the PHP one triggers this message. I need to investigate more. And GSP, of course, is working too, so usually. Yes. And now I use XSL number trick, and I get a lot of M. Okay, nothing magic. Okay. So XXE stands for XML external entities. It's the very, 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 very common XML vulnerability. If you are looking to something processing XML, first try this one. You will probably win. So it's really easy. We define a variable which is ref. Oops. Which is ref. Okay. So we define ref. We say that the value of ref is the content of the file we provide as a parameter. And when we call here, we difference the ref variable, we get the content of the file. It's as stupid as that. So that's some published vulnerabilities XXA vulnerabilities published since last year. So in bold, it's vulnerabilities I found myself, and in red, it's vulnerabilities in libraries, which could impact a lot of different applications. So you can have some very funny things. For example, this is used, if you went to Hack in the Box, it was the DTMF talk. Oops. DTMF talk was using this tool. It's vulnerable. This is used in a lot of applications. And this is the Red Hat virtualization tool. And it's vulnerable too, so you can grab the configuration file, for example. Okay, impact. Most of people see XXC vulnerabilities like reading ASCII files or UTF-8 files and doing SSRF, which is SSRF, which is generating some hits on the internal network. Depending on the context, you can, for example, steal NTLM hashes under Windows. You can list the content of directories under Java, which is very useful if you don't know your target. And you have some very specific cases when you can read binary files, get some information from internal LDAP servers, execute commands, and similar tricks. So, in fact, it depends. It depends of the parser, it depends on the underlying operating system, it depends of the programming language of the XML parser. Every parser in Java shares some common features, and it depends of the application features itself. So, for example, the file URL handler, everybody knows it. Under Java, you can trigger some remote connection and steal hashes. Under Unix, you can access the proc file system and get system information. And under Java, you can do some directory listing, as already said. Okay, PHP. PHP is already very funny for attackers. So we have the HTTP handler, which is useful in order to grab banners. So this is SSH and the VNC banners. You only need to have the PHP message, error message displayed. Okay, this one is excellent. It's some filters which you will instruct the PHP parser to apply some parsing, some conversion to the source document before giving data to your own code. So this means if you are using this kind of URL, you will tell to the PHP interpreter that you want to read /proc/self/cmd line after base64 encoding. I don't know what is the real use case, but I have found one. In fact, this allows to read any binary file which is local to the servers, convert to base64, which is legal ASCII, and then read the output from your XXC vulnerability. This one is very cool too. It's not by default on PHP, but sometimes if the module is installed, you can provide a user, a password, and a URL, and access, if the credentials are valid, any file on this remote machine. So, if you suppose you are on an Oracle database, you know which username and password to try. Okay, demo. Okay, so here I try to read /proc/self/maps, which is the memory mapping of the current process. Okay, that's a Perl application. It's very easy to see it here. And if you have some Perl vulnerability, you now have the address of the heap and the stack of your current process, which is very useful. If we submit to PHP, we have the same information. As you can see, we are inside the Apache 2 process. Of course, it's PHP. and you still get the list of the module installed. Here PDO MySQL, and the rest of the stack and the heap. Okay. But of course you can just grab the etc password file. It's an easy win. Okay, working. And it works on Windows too, so nobody is jealous. Okay, but that's easy. So filters. I will read this file and apply ROT13 encoding. I will read this one here and apply base64 encoding. So let's go. Oh, it works. So, somebody recognize this file? Okay, so that's a Ubuntu server. And this is base64. Yeah. Okay, the interesting part here is here. You have Apache 2 null byte, -k null byte start. So it's impossible to read this file if you are not doing some encoding, because the null byte will be rejected by your XML parser, and you will have an error, but not the content of the file. So this base64 trick is very useful to grab, binaries, zip archives, and everything you need. Okay, fetching banners. Okay, localhost 22. Localhost 22, I have some SSH. Fine. So, if I have a SSH, I will try a root password and something very easy, and try to read the etc shadow file. Yep. So it's a little long because we need to have additional SSH connection. And so this is my root password. If you want to take pictures and decrypt it later, I don't mind. Okay, and just for Java, reading the directory listing of program files. Okay. This was XXC. Now we'll speak about XSLT. Very, very quick introduction to XSLT. If you want more, you just need to grab my slide of last year. XSLT is a functional language defined by the W3C. It's more than 10 years old, and it's used to transform XML to anything else. It could be to XML, just to extract some data, conversion to PDF, SVG, whatever. It's Turing complete, like PostScript, and it's used in a lot of contexts. For example, when you are converting documents in OpenOffice, it's done using XSLT, from OpenOffice to Microsoft Word, for example. Okay, so that's a list of XSLT engines. In green, it's I didn't find any vulnerability. In blue, it's safe by default, but you can easily get code execution if you can modify the configuration. So if the administrator modifies the configuration, and in it's red, it's either design or implementation vulnerabilities. So that's the introduction. Fuzzing. I spent a few weeks doing some XSLT fuzzing. Very, very, very stupid fuzzing. I get some XSLT engines that, okay, I will come later. Some XSLT engines. Some input files that I found using Google or Bing. A diversifier in order to generate a modified file, and some very basic monitoring. The diversifier used is Radamsa. If you are doing mutation-based fuzzing, you should know Radamsa. It's very, 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 very efficient. And monitoring was using background and address sanitizer if I can recompile the code. Okay, like any fuzzing session, the only question is, do you get results? Yes. So that's my problem is that a lot of patches are pending, and so I can't give a lot of details. But this one is public. The mutation was really easy. I just replaced Radamsa, just replace the SVG namespace by the XSLT one, and it created a very, very complicated state inside Firefox. Even Firefox developers were shocked. So we don't know if it's exploitable, but like nobody understands the bug, they choose to say it could be exploitable. Okay, so that's for Oracle. FP is frame pointer, so the frame pointer is under control of the attacker. It's very good news. This is the way to trigger the XML parser of Oracle. So using that, you just need to insert your fuzzing point. That's your fuzzing point, and everything after is really easy. So that's Adobe 9 under Linux. I have some vulnerability for Reader 10 under Windows too, so everybody is impacted, and much more. Okay. So I have a part on basic constructs because XSLT is a functional language, so you don't have you have no loop, no while, no for, and every variable is read-only. So I have a lot of stuff in order to emulate some for and while loop, but it's complicated and I don't have a lot of time. So I will very, very fast, and some demo. Okay, so the demo is, I want a for loop. I want a for loop which is for each property described in this document, get its value. And it's very simple once you understand. You do a for each property, get the value of the property, the content of the property, and get its value here. And you get something like that. So if you are doing a penetration test, you get really a lot of very useful information. Okay, and if here I have a while loop, I mean I will execute commands and I don't know the size of the output, so I need a while in order to iterate. So it's very simple. I describe my commands here. And here I have some XSLT magic I will not explain here. Using reflection and complex things in order to get to only get a while. It's 50 lines of XSLT code in order to emulate 4 lines of Java, a simple while loop in Java. But happily it works. So in red is the command, and it's black, it's the output. So you have a shell on the server. Okay. So you have found a way to trigger high-level code execution inside XSLT, which is really not so uncommon because Xalange under Java by default allow code execution. XML Spy, which is a client-side tool, by default allow .NET and Java code execution. And PHP, if the register PHP function is called, allow to trigger a PHP code from XSLT. So in PHP it's really dumb. You use this namespace, which is mapped to foo, and you call foo, your function, no, foo function, the name of your function and the arguments. So PHP info is trivial. Okay, so that's the code to execute some PHP info from XSLT, and of course, it works. Okay. The hard part is that require, include, and eval are not functions in PHP. It's something like constructs, I believe. So I learned something. But luckily, assert and preg replace are functions and allow to execute arbitrary PHP code. So that's what we will use. Java. At Berlin Side last year, I publicly says that it seems possible to get a Java shell via XSLT because of threading and things like that. And I received a tweet saying you are wrong. Okay, welcome. And the guy gave me a demo, and it was very epic. A true reverse shell using Java and XSLT. I was working on it for something like 3 weeks, and this guy just solved my problem with one tweet. Okay, but this guy is a very hardcore Java exploiter, and he's using, he creates Java payload. So you need to check it if you are in Java stuff. And the fun part is that it can produce exploit in XLNJ format, which is XSLT. So I did a little Ruby coding, and I provided to Metasploit a module, which is not in the trunk for the moment, but you have the ticket number, so you can grab from the ticket. And it's easy way to get Meterpreter shell from PHP or Java context. Oops, excuse me. Oops. Okay, so PHP Meterpreter. Okay. I need to start Metasploit. Okay, so Metasploit will need something like 10 seconds to start. So I will show you the configuration. I will use an exploit here. I will do 2 setup, one for PHP, okay, which is target 0, and one for Java, which is target 1, on different ports on my machine. And here I need to wait for Metasploit. Il me reste combien de temps? How much time? Thank you. Okay, so no cheating. I have 2 jobs running and no sessions. So this is my PHP exploit. I just call a preg replace here using my malicious code here, and my malicious code is eval base64 decode blah 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 blah. Okay, and it works. I get my Meterpreter shell. I will scroll here. Okay. And now Java. So this is a lot more complex because we need to use reflection. I don't know if you see what is reflection in Java. We will use some static object to find the reference to the class and the function we want to use. So this is not my code. This is me42 code, which is the author of Java payload. And the only thing I do is providing that. Submit to JSP. And okay, I get session 2. And as you can see, I have the PHP one running as www-data, and the Java one running as system because it's Java and Tomcat under Windows. So okay, it's a win. And that's all. So I have a brief conclusion, which is very basic. XML is everywhere. If you begin to look for, you will find a lot of XML everywhere. The second point, which is the main point I want you to memorize, is XML is not data. XML is a document, and you can have code, grammar, processing instruction, and eventually data. So when processing an XML document, first check if it's data. If you feed your XML document to your XML parser without checking first, you are asking for trouble. So the offensive side is progressing quickly. As you can see, we have tools. We have tools in Metasploit now. And the very sad part is that DTD and XSLT attacks are known for more than 10 years. You have some public posts on Bugtrack dating from something like 2K1 or 2K, and I still find this kind of vulnerability everywhere. So it's very sad. So I hope everybody will join and find a lot of XML vulnerabilities and make vendors react. Thank you. And if you have any question, it's now. And that's the URL of wiki, where I put every technical information I have on the subject, which can be public. And I'm a little late for the moment, but I will put a lot of content this summer on it. Any question? Wake up, it's finished? Okay, no question. So thank you very much.